20% of your purchasing power gone. Are you going to get a rise? Are you going to get that 20% rise? Nobody is getting those kind of rises, guys. I couldn't believe this story when I heard it. I was in shock. Ukrainian refugees are leaving Calgary because of the high costs. When I saw this story, I was just baffled and took back. But then again, I realized that we're in this massive cost of living crisis that we're in, and normal people are even struggling, let alone refugees who come here with pretty much nothing and are relying on basic government supports just to get by. And you know, that is one of the things with Canada. A lot of people have this vision that they're going to come here and everything's going to be fantastic. They're going to be able to live their life and have a big house and live that Western dream, that Canadian dream. But the problem is, it is completely gone. There is no Canadian dream that is left anymore. And I'm sorry to be that person to say it. I don't want to be the person that says it, but that is the case, guys. The thing is, Canada is in such a bad place economically, politically, financially, and it's all because of just corruption, essentially. Corruption of government after government after government, and we think that everything's going to be different, and it just never is. It's much of the maintenance of a status quo that we see in Canada. And as many of you know, the problems go far beyond the housing market. I mean, the fact is, Canada needs high immigration because the birth rate is so low. But what people fail to understand, even the government fails to understand, is why is that birth rate so low? Part of the reason why that birth rate is so low is because things have gotten so bad in Canada. I mean, at certain times where you've had recessions, things like 2008 have happened, you've seen that the birth rate has collapsed on the back of that. And this is much bigger than 2008, as I'm sure many of you are aware. This is a massive, massive bubble. It's a massive financial bubble, and it's been inflated over the past 2 decades. And really, the psychological impacts of that and scars will be left on Canada for at least a decade, in my opinion. I'm not just saying that to be doom and gloom. I don't want to be the person to be doom and gloom. You look all over Canada right now, and you fail to find a place that is affordable. There is no place in Canada that is affordable anymore. Everywhere, essentially, is very expensive. Even places that people say are quote unquote affordable, like Edmonton, you have a massive crisis in places like that. Homelessness camps popping up everywhere. Places like Calgary, people are told that's a place to go. Well, guess what? You've got people who are moving there and then are having to live in homeless shelters because things are that bad. Rents are so high. And you know, in Alberta in particular, that has seen wages stall out for a long time. Since 2015, wages have pretty much stalled out in Alberta, so it's definitely not the place of prosperity. But the thing is, people are so desperate to find a place and so hopeful that maybe they're going to find something that they don't realize. They're prepared to move. I have made the effort to move from Ontario to Alberta. I did it when Alberta was a significantly cheaper place to move, and it just so happened that the industry that we work in is much more lucrative in Alberta. But having said that, now the tables have turned. It would be better for us to live in a place like British Columbia. So do you think we're going to make that move even though housing prices are coming down here? Absolutely not. You know, when the Freedom Convoy happened, I saw that this is far beyond the original problems that I thought Canada had. I mean, essentially, we saw the government act like a dictatorship. That's essentially what happened. They essentially became a dictatorship when they declared the Emergencies Act. And from that point on, my view was entirely changed of Canada as a country. You had a lot of people from Eastern Europe and from places like Poland who were saying this is exactly what they moved away from when they had the Iron Curtain, when you had West and East Berlin, and Poland was obviously part of the Soviet Republic. So you had all that going on, and then basically we led to the point that we're at right now. When bubbles burst, it is hard for people to understand. It's hard for people to grasp. The psychology of bubbles is definitely difficult. You have different stages of the bubble. You have the run up where there's a lot of euphoria, there's hysteria around that. And then you have the first leg down, which we saw, which was much more severe than the US bubble burst in the housing market. And essentially we are now awaiting the fear/capitulation to set in, which could happen at any time. I mean, you've got a ton of people that are holding off selling their homes, and what happens when they sell them? Suddenly all those supply problems will be gone, and suddenly the mainstream media will change their tune and be saying, how did we not see this one coming, when it was blatantly obvious and staring everybody in the face? The thing is, if the government goes and tries to prop this up, does different things to try and prop this housing market up, keep this bubble going, the country is just going to get even worse. And if we have this massive bubble burst, there will be a lot of pain. The deleveraging will be good though for Canada as a country, because it can move forward and go to a place of recovery and hopefully prosperity. Whereas if you keep that bubble going, you're just kicking that can down the road, and eventually free market forces will take over anyway, crash the thing, and then you'll see an even bigger depression as a result of that. So we wait to see what happens with that. But I think it's obvious to you and me that it's going to be a massive, massive collapse when it does happen, and that you can see it from a mile away, in my opinion. And you know, whether it's now 10 years because they managed to keep it going, or in 5 years time, the risks are just so high, and the stakes have never been higher, and the emotions have never been higher. It definitely feels like now's the time where it's all going wrong, and this bubble's definitely unraveling. When you see the crisis that we have across Canada, housing crisis, cost of living crisis, I mean, it's like the governments, even the future governments like Pierre, he thinks that, oh yeah, we can just cut interest rates, we can just control inflation, everything's going to be fine. You know, inflation is the biggest tax. It's a complete scam. Inflation, 2%, 10 years, that's 20% of your purchasing power gone. Are you going to get a rise? Are you going to get that 20% rise? Nobody is getting those kind of rises, guys. The 2% inflation is a total load of bullshit. And inflation is really a tax on the poor and the middle class, but mainly on the poor people. Rich people, they don't care. Interest rates held high are going to hurt the rich people, the over-leveraged people the most. And those are the people, in my opinion, that need to be squashed out. Because once you get those people squashed out and the deleveraging begins, it's like I said, you can recover, and then optimism can come back, and you can have some sense of a normal country. Whereas right now we have a completely financialized country, and it's just a ridiculous thing that has been pushed so far that now you have just desperation everywhere. You just have homeless people everywhere. I mean, I covered on this channel how 40,000 households in Calgary are at risk of homelessness, and we're talking about Calgary. So imagine how many are at risk in places like Toronto and Vancouver. It's just kind of crazy. All that has happened in Calgary since 2019 is there's been a massive sugar rush in terms of stimulus that was injected into the economy, because the economy, one of the worst economies in Canada, and the recovery that's happened there has been purely based on real estate. There's been no real growth there. You've got some weak tech companies, but look, they're converting all the offices to condos now. But where's everyone going to work? It's just absolutely ridiculous. I have never heard such ridiculous policies as I've heard in Calgary, and it's one of the wokest cities in Canada, along with Edmonton. In my opinion, those cities are just some of the worst in the country. We just have to do what we can to protect ourselves, to stay safe during these times, to protect free speech at all costs, because that's what we really have to do, guys, because free speech is everything, and they are working with Bill C-11 and all these other laws to essentially change that. You need a VPN now more than ever. If you want to sign up with my link, it's expressvpn.com/marketmania. I promote the VPN, not just because it helps out the channel, because they're the best VPN provider, and you need a VPN in Canada. It's kind of insane. It's like China that we need a VPN. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here, you might like this playlist here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.